Hi everyone, Ruslan Bilov here again with today's Frontline briefing from Ukraine. Let's start with the headline story. Ukraine has requested a ceasefire in the Black Sea for civilian shipping. It appears strikes on ships and port infrastructure hit the Ukrainian side hard. The request was passed through third country intermediaries. Interesting pattern, by the way. Whenever Ukraine starts making gains, a ceasefire request tends to follow shortly after. It's almost become a rhythm of this war, gains on one side reliably producing diplomatic overtures from the other. Worth recalling how this whole success story began, it was Zelensky himself who announced a 40-day plan to force Russia into peace. The results are now visible to everyone. Even Western outlets have acknowledged the plan failed to achieve any of its stated goals. Once Russian forces began striking Ukrainian business assets, the economy reportedly took an immediate hit, somewhat unexpected, since the enterprises generating the bulk of budget revenue have long been known targets. It seems Moscow had deliberately avoided this level of escalation until now, but with Zelensky having pushed things this far, Kiev is now seeking peace as agriculture and metallurgy absorb serious losses, with the budget reportedly facing a shortfall of at least $1 billion in direct revenue, plus several billion more in lost foreign currency earnings. Also worth recalling the earlier claims about cutting off Crimea's supply lines, a plan previously announced by Madjar, commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces. The stated goal was to block fuel, food, and other supply routes into Crimea. It quickly became clear, however, that Ukraine lacked the capacity to sustain that level of escalation. Russian command redirected a significant number of mobile air defense groups to the area, and most drones are now being intercepted before reaching Crimea. It's also worth noting that while Europe continues funding Ukraine, the cost to European governments keeps climbing and is set to rise further, with several EU member states already signaling budget strain heading into next year. Due to the port blockade, Ukrainian grain exports have collapsed several times over, and Kyiv has been rerouting shipments through Moldova into Romania by rail and truck. Today brought new footage of strikes on locomotives along that route, a clear signal the Russian side doesn't intend to let exports flow undisturbed through alternative corridors either. On that note, a related Reuters report just came out on Ukraine's agricultural sector, and the picture is even more troubling. Some Ukrainian grain storage facilities are already nearing capacity, with the corn harvest approaching, raising the risk of insufficient storage for the new crop. Farmers who previously sold to exporters and processors report falling demand and slower payments. Wheat exports remain one of the few segments still generating profit for Ukrainian farmers, while returns on several other crops may not even cover production costs, according to analysts. Export revenue is essential for farms to cover fuel, wages, and preparation for the next sowing season. Kyiv is seeking alternative export routes, but overland export capacity is now more constrained than even in 22. Contributing factors include strained rail and road logistics, lower water levels on the Danube, strikes on transport infrastructure, and changes to the EU trade regime. An added complication is the deterioration in relations with Poland, where farmers have previously protested against competition from Ukrainian grain. So it seems Zelensky's powerful plan has unfolded quite differently than intended, and it's worth pointing out that these agricultural pressures compound each other. A farm sector already squeezed by falling export margins now also faces a storage bottleneck it may not be able to solve before the harvest lands, regardless of what happens on the diplomatic track. Now let's move to today's frontline developments, and there's a lot to cover. In the previous briefing, I mentioned an AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine advance in Dnipropetrovsk region. There's further confirmed progress there today, backed by footage. I expect a more active Russian response on this sector soon, since although the AFU's pace remains slow, movement is still occurring. This sector remains worth watching closely. AFU units are approaching key roads and settlements, and Russian forces cannot afford to let that opportunity stand. Turning to Russian gains, on the Pokrovsk sector near Novopodorny, Russian forces have advanced toward Rai Pol and to the north of the settlement itself. This sector had seen little movement for some time, despite room to maneuver. On the Dobropilia sector, the gray zone has expanded in several spots. North of Myrn, near the small settlement of Dobropilia, no objective control footage has emerged from there yet. The gray zone expansion is being tracked mainly through contact with troops on the ground. Similarly, no confirmed footage has come from the eastern part of Dobropilia, likely because it isn't yet advantageous for the Russian side to showcase these gains. That said, there's little doubt Russian infantry is already inside the settlement, an assessment also echoed by Western open-source analysts, mappers among them. On the Zaporizhzhia direction, Russian forces have launched a large-scale push on Orikhiv, leaving entire AFU units cut off from regular supply. As a reminder, Russian forces had earlier entered the town from the south via neighboring Novodanilivka and had also taken most of the well-known Malatokmashka, entering it from the western side as well. Ukrainian troop groups are now reported to be encircled just south of the town. The evident Russian objective is to straighten the front line, eliminate this pocket, and establish a continuous staging area south of Orikhiv to mass forces for a full assault on the town. This pocket dynamic has become a recurring feature of the war more broadly, rather than pulling exposed units back in time. Ukrainian command has repeatedly held positions past the point where withdrawal remains viable, and the human cost of that pattern is difficult to overstate. AFU units reportedly continue receiving orders to hold their positions at all costs, a situation reflected in footage previously shown of Ukrainian soldiers under extreme conditions in the pocket. Additional footage has emerged from this sector. Russian forces reportedly captured a Colombian mercenary fighting for the AFU. Notably, women are now apparently being recruited into these mercenary ranks as well, an indication of how strained Ukraine's reserve situation has become. She was reported to be quite young. Moving to the Druzhkivka direction, advances are currently concentrated on the western approach, though I expect the southern flank to become active soon, given developments around Oleksivo Druzhkivka. The town itself continues to face strikes from guided glide bombs. With numerous multi-story buildings still standing, the area likely houses a substantial number of first-person view FPV drone operators. Until many of these buildings and the operators inside them are neutralized, entering the town will remain difficult. This has become something of an axiom of this war: clear out FPV operators first, then attempt an assault or risk heavy losses. A small team of drone operators can eliminate dozens of soldiers within half an hour, personnel whose training took months and represented significant investment, and this dynamic applies to both sides of the conflict. From Sloviansk, reports indicate Russian forces destroyed a bridge connecting different parts of the city. One span has completely collapsed. Repairs will be difficult, requiring heavy equipment, with the work itself expected to take days. It's likely the Russian side will maintain pressure on this area to prevent Ukrainian forces from bringing in repair equipment. There aren't many such bridges in the Kramatorsk-Sloviansk area, and if this effort is pursued systematically, it could be possible to take out all of them, significantly complicating AFU logistics across the Kasenie-Turets River. At the same time, Russian forces continue clearing and advancing through the sizable settlement of Oleksiv Druzhkivka, located between Kostiantynivka and Druzhkivka, and consisting largely of private housing. The main AFU stronghold here is the central industrial zone, far smaller than the one in Kostiantynivka, but AFU units are reportedly still holding onto it. From the Ozykov area, Russian forces have advanced through private housing to reach Rokossovskoe Street, gradually infiltrating toward the settlement center. East of Kramatorsk, Russian forces have also advanced. From the previously captured village of Markov, they reportedly pushed west and reached the eastern outskirts of Fetorivka, where fighting has now begun for the village itself. In the Kharkiv region, active fighting continues as well. In the border area near Prikolotne, Russian forces are reportedly closing a pincer movement, aiming to encircle an AFU group positioned further north along the border. Two Russian groupings are said to be advancing toward each other. Near Aniskian, the area of control continues to expand, with forces pushing west from Ustinivka toward neighboring Kupine, territory reported to have come under Russian control today. Elsewhere along the same front, advances continue through tree lines. The area between Bakshivka and Ivanivka has reportedly been cut off, and roughly half of Vasilivka is now under Russian control. This chain of villages, Zakharivka, Ivanivka, Vasilivka, and Blahodatne, has effectively merged into continuous built-up terrain, making it difficult to distinguish where one settlement ends and the next begins without prior knowledge of the area. Russian forces are reportedly advancing through this private housing corridor. Fighting continues around Kozacha Lopen, though without reported changes to the front line there. Further advances are reported to the north as well. The border village of Rohisne has reportedly come fully under Russian control today. Nearby, Basalivka was captured earlier and Rysivka just a couple of days ago. This pattern of movement suggests Russian command may be aiming to eliminate this border salient as well, establishing another staging area and eventually linking it with existing footholds to further expand the area under control. Notably not far from here lies Bilopilia, not a small settlement but a town with official city status. Russian forces appear to be advancing in that direction, which would allow them to cut the supply route running from Sumy to Kharkiv in the region's northern section. Once Russian forces reach and cut Highway R44, supply to the city would become significantly more difficult. This looks like preparation for a further approach, potentially toward fighting for Sumy itself down the line. That scenario likely remains some time off, possibly 2027, 2028, but given the conflict is now in its fifth year, it's plausible that fighting on the outskirts of Sumy could become a topic of discussion as early as next year. Speaking of the costs this war is imposing on all sides involved, a recent Washington Post report details U.S. losses in its conflict with Iran. According to the report, the United States has lost roughly a quarter of its MQ-9 Reaper drone fleet during the conflict with Iran. The value of the destroyed aircraft is estimated at over $1.3 billion. The U.S. had approximately 185 MQ-9 Reapers before the conflict began, meaning confirmed losses represent close to a quarter of the entire fleet. These drone losses are part of a broader strain on U.S. military stockpiles. Both the conflict with Iran and years of arms shipments to Ukraine have depleted reserves of various munitions and constrained Washington's available capacity. To cover military expenses and rebuild these stockpiles, the Trump administration is seeking an additional $67 billion in funding from Congress. Missile defense presents a further challenge. The U.S. has expended hundreds of THAAD interceptors, and replenishing that stockpile quickly won't be possible. As this shows, the costs of this conflict extend well beyond Ukraine's economy and logistics. The strain is being felt on the other side of the ledger too, and it raises a genuine question about how much longer Washington can keep funding two theaters of engagement simultaneously without difficult trade-offs at home. We'll continue monitoring developments across all sectors of the front. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Ruslan Belov. Until the next briefing.